Imagine a world where every step you take, every decision you make, and every word you utter is driven by an unwavering faith in your own abilities. This is the universe Ralph Waldo Emerson invites us to explore in his masterpiece, Self-Confidence. In a deeply personal and philosophical journey, Emerson challenges us to shed the doubts and expectations imposed by society, guiding us towards a life of authenticity and courage. Prepare to discover the hidden power within you as we unravel the teachings of one of the greatest thinkers in history. Welcome to a transformative experience that will awaken your spirit and inspire you to live with purpose and conviction. Man is his own star, and the soul that can render an honest and a perfect man commands all light, all influence, all fate. Nothing to him falls early or too late. Our acts, our angels are, or good or ill, our fatal shadows that walk by us still. Epilogue to Beaumont and Fletcher's Honest Man's Fortune. I read the other day some verses written by an eminent painter which were to me original and not conventional. Always the spirit perceives the admonition in such lines, let the subject be what it may. The sentiment they instill is of more value than any thought they may contain. To believe your own thought, to believe that what is true for you in your private heart is true for all men, that is genius. Speak your latent conviction, and it shall be the universal sense. For the inmost in due time becomes the outmost, and our first thought is rendered back to us by the trumpets of the last judgment. Familiar as the voice of the mind is to each, the highest merit we ascribe to Moses, Plato, and Milton is that they set at naught books and traditions, and spoke not what men, but what they thought. A man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his thought, because it is his. In every work of genius we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. Great works of art teach us to abide by our spontaneous impression with good-humored inflexibility, then most, when the whole cry of voices is on the other side. Else, tomorrow a stranger will say with masterly good sense precisely what we have thought and felt all the time, and we shall be forced to take with shame our own opinion from another. There is a time in every man's education when he arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide, that he must take himself for better, for worse, as his portion, that though the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to him but through his toil bestowed on that plot of ground which is given to him to till. The power which resides in him is new in nature, and none but he knows what that is which he can do, nor does he know until he has tried. Not for nothing one face, one character, one fact makes much impression on him, and another none. This sculpture in the memory is not without pre-established harmony. The eye was placed where one ray should fall, that it might testify of that particular ray. We but half express ourselves, and are ashamed of that divine idea which each of us represents. It may be safely trusted as proportionate and of good issues, so it be faithfully imparted, but God will not have his work made manifest by cowards. A man is relieved and gay when he has put his heart into his work and done his best, but what he has said or done otherwise shall give him no peace. It is a deliverance which does not deliver. In the attempt his genius deserts him. No muse befriends, no invention, no hope. Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. Accept the place the divine providence has found for you, the society of your contemporaries, the connection of events. Great men have always done so, and confided themselves childlike to the genius of their age, betraying their perception that the absolutely trustworthy was seated at their heart, working through their hands, predominating in all their being. And we are now men, and must accept in the highest mind the same transcendent destiny, and not minors and invalids in a protected corner, not cowards fleeing before a revolution, but guides, redeemers, and benefactors, obeying the almighty effort, and advancing on chaos and the dark. How beautiful are the oracles that nature offers us in this text, reflected in the faces and behavior of children, infants, and even fools. None of them show a divided and rebellious spirit, nor a confidence in their own feelings. When arithmetic evaluates the forces and means contrary to our design, their spirits are complete, their gaze not yet conquered. And when we look at their faces, we are perplexed. Childhood bends to nothing, everything bends to it, and thus a baby makes 4 or 5 adults babble and play with him. Similarly, God has endowed youth, puberty, and maturity with the same cunning and charm. He has made them enviable and graceful. Therefore, when their claims reach firmness, they must not be disregarded. Do not think that youth lacks strength because it does not speak to us directly. Pay attention. If you hear its voice in the next room, it will reach you clearly enough and with vehemence. It seems to know how to address its contemporaries, whether shy or bold, and will know how to make all adults somewhat superfluous. This incapacity of the young, who knows he always has a warm meal on his table and who, as if he were a lord, declines to say something pleasant to win our admiration, is nothing but a healthy attitude of human nature. A young person in a salon is like a deck of cards in an independent and responsible gambling house. He observes from his corner the people and things that pass by, judges them all according to their merits, and classifies them with the swiftness of a child as good, bad, interesting, foolish, eloquent, or boring. Consequences and interests do not concern him at all. He offers us an independent and authentic judgment. You must court him, not he you. However, the adult is, so to speak, a prisoner of his own conscience. The moment he acts or speaks for the public, he becomes an engaged individual, analyzed according to the sympathy or hatred of hundreds of other people whose effects must be taken into account. From now on, there is no remedy for this. I hope to return to neutrality, someone who can leave behind the promises and, after having had the previous perspective, can look again from an innocence without affectation, prejudice, or bribes. This must be a colossus. He will give his opinion on all ephemeral subjects, not apparently as something personal but as necessary, planting them like arrows in the heart of man and frightening him. There are voices we can hear in solitude, but that disappear as soon as we set foot in the world. Everywhere, society becomes a conspiracy against the individuality of each of its members. It is nothing more than a joint stock company in which, to better ensure the bread of each shareholder, its members agree to take away freedom and culture from the guests. The most demanded virtue is conformity. Self-reliance is its antagonist. This society does not value realities or creators, but names and customs. He who wants to be a man must be a nonconformist. He who wants to win immortal applause must not stop at the name of goodness, but must explore if it is really goodness. Nothing is more sacred than the integrity of your own mind. If it absolves you of yourself, then you will have the support of the entire world. I remember once being young, I had to respond to an esteemed tutor who kept pestering me with the ancient doctrines of the church. When he asked me what I should do with the sacred traditions if I lived entirely from my inner self, my companion suggested that these impulses might come from the lowest, not the highest. I replied that I did not believe it to be so, but if I am the Son of the Eternal, I will live from him. No law can be more sacred than that of my own nature. Good and bad are just concepts that we easily transfer to this or that, but the only good is what extends my nature, and the only bad is what goes against it. A human being must stand by himself against all opposition, as if everything else were immaterial and ephemeral, except himself. I am ashamed to think of how easily we capitulate to flags and words, to large groups and dead institutions. Every decent and persuasive individual affects and touches me more than what is correct. I should myself walk upright and energetically and tell the truth regardless of circumstances. We must allow malice and vanity to disguise themselves as philanthropy. If a fanatic embarks on the lucrative cause of an earthquake and approaches me to give me the latest news about Barbados, I see no reason why I should not tell him to devote his love to his children, as well as to the woodcutters of the forest. Be good-natured, be modest, attain grace, and do not seek to clothe that cruel and uncharitable ambition you have towards comrades thousands of miles away in an implausible tenderness. According to popular opinion, virtues are more an exception than a rule. Here is a man with virtues. People perform what is called a good deed, whether it be an act of courage or charity, in the same manner as they pay a fine for not attending the daily exhibition. Their works are nothing but an apology or a weakening of their existence in the world. I do not want to expiate my fault. I want to live my life. It has value in itself. It is not made for show. I would much prefer it, even if it were less varied but authentic and balanced, than brilliant and uncertain. I want it to be firm and gentle, without needing regimes or transfusions. I ask you to show me above all that you are a man. I have already learned that it is the same to perform a noble action as to renounce it. I cannot consent to pay for a privilege to which I am not naturally entitled, however limited my talents may be. I exist, and I do not need the secondary testimony of myself or my peers. All I must do is what concerns me, not what others believe. This rule, as difficult in real life as in intellectual life, serves as a distinction between greatness and mediocrity, and it is all the harder when you encounter those who claim to know better than you what your duty is in their city. It is easy to live by the opinion of others. Although in solitude it is easy to live by our own, however, a great man is one who, when he is in the midst of the crowd, knows how to preserve the independence of solitude with perfect grace. The main objection to submitting to customs that already seem dead to you is that they disperse your forces, waste your time, and dilute the imprint of your character. If you support a dead church, vote for a major party, whether for or against the government, or set your table in any particular way, it will be difficult for me to discover what kind of person you are under so many faces. Moreover, obviously all this strength is subtracted from your authentic life. On the other hand, if you do your work, I will know you, do your work, and it will strengthen you. A person must know that conformity is the game of blind man's bluff. If I know what you belong to, I know your arguments in advance. When I hear a preacher announce that the subject of his sermon will be the propriety of one of his church's institutions, I immediately know that he will not say a single new and spontaneous word. I am convinced that despite much talk about the need to examine the foundations of the institution, he will not do so himself. I know he has promised to look only at the side allowed to him, not as a man, but as a pastor. He is nothing more than a repressed prosecutor, and the arrogance of the pulpit is the worst hypocrisy. Well, many have blindfolded themselves with this or that handkerchief, rallying to one of these general opinions. This submission does not make them false on a few subjects or authors of a few lies, but false in everything. None of their truths are even remotely real. Their two is not the real two, and their four is not the real four. Every word they say is a delusion, although we do not know where to start correcting them. Meanwhile, nature rushes to provide us with the uniform of the party we must adhere to. Thus, we begin to have the same expression on our faces and gradually acquire the same idiotic grimace. In particular, there is a humble experience that continues to wreak havoc even in general history. I refer to the foolish grimace of admiration, the smile we force when we are in unpleasant company and responding to a conversation that does not interest us at all. Muscles that do not move spontaneously do so according to a petty will. They tense up over the entire face and give a very bland sensation. If you are a nonconformist, the world punishes you with its disapproval. The individual must learn to appreciate a brusque gesture. Bystanders look at him with suspicion, whether in public or at a friend's house. If this version came from an ear or resistance equal to theirs, he would do well to go home with a sad face. However, the unfriendly gesture of the crowd, just like its friendly face, has no deep motive. They put it on and take it off depending on which way the wind blows or what the newspaper tells them. Nonetheless, the people's discontent is more imposing than that of the Senate or the university. For a firm man, it is very easy to tolerate the anger of the cultured classes. Theirs is a decent and prudent anger because it is a class inherently vulnerable. However, when this anger is added to the indignation of other people, when the ignorant rise up, when the brute and reflective force that rests at the bottom of society rises, it requires habits of magnanimity and a religion worthy of a god to treat it as a triviality. The other fear that drives us to flee from self-reliance is our consistency, that is, respect for past acts and words. The eyes of others have no more data to evaluate our trajectory than past facts, and we are reluctant to disappoint them despite everything, for we should keep our heads. How to tear this corpse from memory without contradicting something you said at such and such a place? Imagine you contradict yourself. What happens then? One of the rules of wisdom seems to be not to guide oneself solely by memory, even in acts of pure memory, but to judge the past through 1,000 eyes of the present and always live a new day in your metaphysics. You have deprived divinity of personality in your metaphysics, yet when devout feelings arise in the total soul and life, even if you must disguise the figure of God with colors and shapes, abandon your theory, just as Joseph left his coat with the adulteress and fled. The goblin of simple minds is inconsistency, the very one that the poorest politicians, philosophers, and priests adore. If a great mind possesses consistency, it has nothing more to do. He can devote himself entirely to himself and his shadow. Say what you think today with stern words, and in the same way, say what you think tomorrow, even if it contradicts what you said today. Thus, you ensure that everything is misunderstood. That is why it is so bad to be misunderstood. Pythagoras, Socrates, Jesus, Galileo, Newton, and all the other pure and wise spirits who have been incarnated in the world were misunderstood. To be great is to be misunderstood. I suppose no one can violate his own nature. All the emanations of his will are circumscribed by the law of my being. Just as the projections of the Andes and the Himalayas are insignificant to the general summit of the globe, it matters little to test or challenge the individual. A personality is like an acronym or a palindromic verse. It means the same whether you read it forwards or backwards. In this delightful and withdrawn existence that God has granted me, I allow myself to note my humble thoughts day by day without looking back or forward. And I have no doubt that all these thoughts are symmetrical, even if I neither see nor intend them to be. Thus my work must have the scent of pine trees and the hum of insects. The swallows flying over my roof must weave into my own web the threads or twigs they carry in their beaks. We pass through what we are. Character educates above the will. Man thinks he can communicate his virtues or vices only through open actions and fails to realize that virtue and vice always breathe through themselves. There will always be harmony in any variety of actions when they are honest and natural in their time. This is so because actions in harmony emanate from a single will, no matter how different they may seem. Their differences are lost when viewed from a distance, from a higher thought. A single tendency unites them all. The best ships sail in a zigzag due to 1,000 voyages, but if viewed from afar, the line straightens. Your genuine action will not only explain itself, but also the others of its kind. Conversely, your conformity explains nothing, and acting individually and everything you have done in this manner will justify you. Greatness calls for the future. If today I can be strong enough to act rightly and mock the looks of others, it is because I have already done so in the past, and thus I can defend myself. Whatever happens, act well in this moment. If you unmask appearances, you can do it. The strength of character is cumulative. The virtuous days of the past exert their force in the present. The consciousness of having behind you a whole series of memorable days and victories, days that cast a uniform light on the one who comes to act after, and is watched by a guard of angels. This is precisely what ignites the thunder in Satan's voice, what gives dignity to Washington's posture, and what makes America reflect in Adam's eyes. Honor seems venerable to us because it is not ephemeral. It is always an ancient virtue. Today we revere it because it does not belong to the present. We love and pay homage to it because it is not a trap for our love and offering, but it depends on the person, stems from them, and thus belongs to an ancient and immaculate caste even when manifested in a young person. I hope that our days will pronounce the final words on conformity and consistency. Henceforth, let us leave all this rhetoric to the magazines and mockery. Let us no longer reference or apologize. If today a great man comes to dine with me, I do not want to please him, but I want him to want to please me. I will represent humanity, and even though I want to make it lovable, I first want to make it true. Let us confront and curb the subtle mediocrity and the meager felicity of the times. Let us throw the law in the face of fashions, commerce, and trades. The undeniable fact of history is that in every place where every human being works, there is a noble and responsible thinker and actor. The true man does not belong to any other place or time, but he is the center of things where he is. There is nature that evaluates us all men and all the facts in an ordinary way. Each individual in society reminds us of something or someone. Personality and reality evoke nothing at all because they take the place of creation itself. Man must have such greatness that it renders circumstances insignificant. Every authentic man is a cause, a nation, an era, requiring a space of infinite numbers and time to reach his goal, so that posterity seems to follow his footsteps like a litany of clients. Born to someone called Caesar, and for centuries we have the Roman Empire. Born Christ, and millions of souls grow and attach themselves to his genius in such a way that he is confused with the very virtue and potential of humanity. An institution is the extended shadow of an individual. Monastic life is that of the hermit Anthony. Luther's Reformation, Fox's Quakerism, Wesley's Methodism, Clarke's secularism. All are Milton himself, referring to Scipio as the summit of Rome. All history unfolds from the biography of a few solid and austere figures. Let the individual then find his own value, and he will hold all things under his dominion. Do not allow him to spy, steal, or move from place to place hiding as if he were a beggar, a bastard, or an intruder. However, the man on the street who does not find in himself a value that corresponds to the strength needed to build a tower or carve a god in marble feels disinherited when looking at such works. For him, a palace, a statue, or an expensive book has a distant and forbidden allure, as if it were a very flashy carriage that seems to say to him, "And who are you?" Quite the opposite. These are all his things. They claim his attention and demand that his faculties show themselves and take possession. The painting awaits my verdict. It has no control over me. It is I who must decide if it deserves praise. Remember that fable where they took a drunkard from the street, led him to a duke's house, made him wash and dress, then put him in the duke's bed, after which the next morning everyone treated him with the pomp worthy of a duke and told him he had lost his mind. Well, this story must be his fame, for it perfectly symbolizes the state of man who in the present world is nothing more than a drunkard who wakes up from time to time, uses his reason, and realizes he is truly a prince. Our readings are poor and flattering regarding history. Our own imagination deceives us. Kingdoms and nobility, power and social class form a more attractive vocabulary than the particular Ion or Edward who live in their little houses and work every day. However, the vital questions are the same for all, and the sum of all these questions gives us the same result. For as many differences between Alfred, Scar, Denver, and Gustavo, let us imagine they were all virtuous men. Have they exhausted virtues? What depends on your private acts today is as great as what those famous public steps depended on. When a particular individual acts from an original point of view, the actions of kings transfer to him the splendor of knights to the world. He has been educated by his kings, who have hypnotized the eyes of nations. A symbol of such magnitude has taught us the mutual reverence that man must have towards other men, that joyful loyalty with which individuals from around the world have endured, that their monarchs, nobles, or owners act according to their own particular laws. To judge men and things using a different scale, not to pay their privileges with money, but with honor, and to believe in representatives of the law, constitutes the hieroglyph by which they have an obscure awareness of their rights and bravery, an attribute of all men. The allure of any original action is explained when one questions the reason for self-confidence. On what primordial subject can universal confidence be founded? What is the nature and power of this star that defies science? This star without parallel or measurable elements that casts a halo of beauty even on impure and trivial actions as soon as the slightest trace of independence appears. These questions lead us to that source which we call spontaneity or instinct, the essence of genius, virtue, and life. We call this primal and deep wisdom intuition, while everything that follows is teaching. In this primal and deep force find their origin, as in all things, even those distant facts that science does not reach. This occurs because the sense of existence, which awakens in our soul during moments of calm, is not different from the objects of space, light, time, or man, but forms a unity with them and originates objectively from the same source from which life and being of these things come. We first share the life that makes things exist, after which we see them as appearances of nature, and forget that we have shared their cause. Here lies the source of action and thought. These are the lungs of inspiration that give the individual knowledge and cannot be denied without showing impiety and atheism. We are in the lap of an immeasurable intelligence that makes us the receivers of its truth and means of action. When we discern justice or truth, we do not do it by ourselves, but we open the way to its rays of light. If we ask where this comes from, if we try to delve into the mind that creates it, all philosophy will be wrong. All we can affirm is its presence or absence. Each person distinguishes the voluntary acts of their mind from their involuntary perceptions and knows that they must have unwavering faith in the latter. They may be mistaken in their expression, but they know that these perceptions are as they are and admit no discussion, like day and night. My voluntary actions and discoveries are fleeting. On the contrary, it is the most spontaneous dream, the simplest and vaguest emotion that guides my curiosity and respect. The bewildered people are those who contradict their perceptions as easily as their opinions, because they do not distinguish between the two. They imagine that it is I who choose to perceive this or that. In reality, perception is not capricious but obligatory. If I see a distinctive feature, my son will also see it after some time, and then all of humanity will, even if no one had seen it before me. My perception is a fact just as the sun is. The relations between the soul and the divine spirit are so pure that it is profanation to try to interpose any aid between them. When God addresses us, he must communicate. He must say not one thing but all things. He must fill the world with his voice and spread light, nature, time, and souls from the heart of the present thought to give the world a new time and creation. Where there is a simple spirit receiving divine wisdom, the old affairs fade into masterful means, texts, and temples. There lives the now, absorbing the past and future into the present moment. All things related to it, regardless of their nature, become sacred. The cause of things dissolves into them, and particular miracles disappear into a universal miracle. Thus, never believe someone who claims to know God and speak with him, for he reverts to the vocabulary of an ancient nation, to another world, as if the acorn is better than the oak, if that is the communication. Is the father better than the son to whom he has bequeathed his matured being? Because so much idolatry towards the past, the centuries only conspire against the wisdom and authority of the spirit. Time and space are but shades of color created by the eye, while the soul is the light where it arrives. Where it arrives, the day opens. Where it ceases to be, the night has arrived, and in all this, history is nothing more than an impertinence and an affront, even admitting that it is something more than a joyful apology or a parable of my being and becoming. Man is timid and constantly asks for forgiveness. He no longer walks upright, dares not say I think or I am, but limits himself to quoting a saint or a scholar. He feels shame before a blade of grass or a blooming rose. These roses growing under my window do not refer to earlier or better ones. They are what they are. They exist with God today. For them, there is no time. There is only the rose, perfect at every moment of its existence. Before a bud blooms, its entire life comes into action. In the flower, there is nothing else, while at the bare root, all is at all times. Its nature is satisfied at every moment, just as it satisfies nature. However, man only postpones or remembers. He does not live in the present. His eyes are either nostalgic for the past, or he walks on eggshells trying to guess the future, ignoring the riches around him. He cannot be happy or strong until he lives with nature in the present beyond time. This should be quite clear now. However, we can see how many powerful intellects do not dare to listen. Rarely do we place such a high value on so few texts, on so few lives. We are like those children who repeat from memory the phrases of their grandmothers or tutors, and growing up, the talented figures they know, desperately trying to remember the exact words they once said. Later, when they adopt the viewpoint those expressed, they understand and can abandon those phrases, for when the occasion necessitates, they will know how to create their own with equal ease. If we truly live, then we can truly see. Being strong is as simple for a strong individual as being weak is for the weak. When we feel a new perception, we can joyfully discharge our memory of accumulated treasures, as if we decided to throw away old rubbish. When the individual lives with God, his voice is as sweet as the murmur of a stream or the whisper of cornfields. For now, the highest truth on this subject has not yet been said and probably cannot be, since everything we talk about is nothing more than a distant memory of what was sensed in my thoughts. The closest it comes is the following. When goodness approaches you, when you feel life within you, it will not be in the usual manner. You will no longer distinguish the traces of others. You will not see another man's face, nor hear another man. The manner, the idea, and the benefit will be completely foreign and new. You will set aside example and experience and take the path from man, not to him. All those who have lived are but long-forgotten advisers. Fear and hope will also be left behind, for there is something petty even in hope. At the moment the vision arrives, there is nothing we can call appropriate gratitude and joy. The mind that rises above passions contemplates eternal identity and causality, perceives the intrinsic existence of truth and righteousness, and then calms with the awareness that all things follow their proper course. The vast natural spaces, the Atlantic Ocean, the southern seas, the great periods of time, years, centuries, all cease to matter. What I think and experience forms the basis of all past states of life and its circumstances, and also supports the present. What we call life and what we call death, it is life that has value, not the fact of having lived. Power ceases in moments of rest, for it receives in the transition from a past state to a new state, in the past of the abyss, in the arrow that heads towards its goal. The world hates this reality, for it equates to degrading the past forever, turning all riches into crumbs and all reputation into shame. With your thorn, the saint will say, with the scoundrel, if so, why do we talk so much about self-confidence? Wherever the soul is present, there will be power, not satisfied, but active. Talking about confidence is just a poor and external way of speaking. It is better to talk about what one trusts, what acts, and what possesses a greater degree of obedience than I do. Even if I do not lift a finger around me, I move through the gravitation of spirits. When we talk about eminent virtue, we imagine it as something rhetorical. We have not yet been able to notice that virtue means height, that according to the laws of nature, a man or a group of men malleable and permeable to principles must conquer and rule over all cities, all nations, kings, millionaires, and poets who lack this nature. Here is the ultimate fact to which we quickly arrive in this field, as in all others, the resolution of everything into the ever-sacred unity. Existence in itself is homage to a supreme cause, so that the measure of good is established according to the degree to which it penetrates into lower forms. Things are real, according to the virtue they contain. Commerce, marriage, war, eloquence, all are something, and deserve my respect as examples of the impure presence and action of it. I can see how in nature this same law exerts its influence on conservation and development. In nature, power is the essential measure of right. It allows nothing in its realm that does not help itself. The creation and development of a planet, its position and orbit, the crooked tree that straightens after the storm, or the vital resources of any animal and plant are examples of a self-sufficient and self-confident spirit. In this way everything concentrates. Let us not be wanderers and sit at home with the cause of brilliance, deceive this crowd of intrusive men and books by proclaiming naturally the divine fact. Let the invaders remove their shoes, for God inhabits this house. Let our simplicity judge them. Let our obedience to our own law reveal the miserable nature and fortune of our wealthy citizens. Yet we are still a crowd. Man should not fear his own genius. He is advised to stay at home, to connect with the inner ocean. Instead, he goes abroad to beg for a glass of water from others' springs. We must walk alone. I prefer to feel the silence that fills the church before the service, rather than any prayer. How distant, serene, and chaste people seem when surrounded by a sanctuary or a religious building. Why should we take on the errors of a friend, wife, father, or son? Is it because we sit around the same game, or because it is said that the same blood flows in our veins? All men have my blood, and I have theirs, yet I will not adopt their same ridiculous and arrogant attitude, for I have even come to feel shame for your solitude. It should not be mechanical but spiritual, meaning an elevation. There are times when it seems the world conspires to pester us with pompous details: friends, clients, children, illnesses, fears, needs, charity. All knock at the door of your refuge and cry out to come out with them. You must maintain your condition and not mingle with their disorders. The power that men have to disturb me, I have granted them by a weak curiosity. No one can approach me except through my actions. We have what we love, but desire makes us strip away love. If we cannot immediately attain the holiness of obedience and faith, let us at least resist temptation. Let us enter a state of war. Let us raise courage and constancy in our Saxon souls in such timid times as ours. This is done by telling the truth. Suppress all false hostility and affection. Do not live waiting for those frustrated and frustrating people you converse with. Tell them, father, mother, wife, brother, friend, up to now I have lived with you according to appearances. From now on I belong to the truth. You must know that from this moment I obey no law other than the eternal. In me you will find no promises, only proximity. I will strive to nourish my parents, provide for my family, and be a worthy husband to my wife. But these ties, even if consummated in a new and never-before-seen manner, I speak to you from your own customs, but I must be myself. I can no longer divide myself for you, nor demand anything from you. If you can love me for who I am, then we will all be happy. If you cannot seek and deserve it, I will not hide my likes or dislikes. I will have such confidence that all that is profound is also sacred. I will spare no effort to do what my heart dictates and what brings me inner joy. If you are of noble character, I will love you. If not, neither you nor I will be offended by hypocritical compliments. If you are authentic in a way different from mine, be faithful to your companions, for I will seek mine. I do none of this with selfish intent, but with humility and honesty. Although we have lived among lies, the goal, yours and that of all men, is to live in your truth. It seems too severe to say something like this nowadays. Soon we will love what our nature dictates. If we follow the steps of truth, it will save us safe and sound. However, it will harm your friends. So be it. I cannot sell my freedom and power to protect their sensitivity. Moreover, everyone has moments of lucidity when they turn their eyes towards the religion of absolute truth. Then they will defend me and act as I do. People think that your rejection of popular principles equates to rejecting all principles, which equates to antinomianism itself. Thus, even the most reckless sybarite will use the name of philosophy to disguise his crimes. However, the law of conscience remains. There are two kinds of confessions we can resort to for absolution. You can fulfill your duty by confessing directly or indirectly. Consider if you have taken care of your relationships with your father, mother, cousin, neighbor, city, cat, and dog. Check if any of them can reprimand you. For my part, I can set aside this reflex principle and absolve myself. I have my own worthy claims and my perfect circle, and that does not consider obligations that pass for such. However, if I am able to discharge debts, I can manage without the popular code. If anyone thinks this law is too lenient, let them try to uphold it for just one day. Truly, whoever is capable of rejecting humanity's usual arguments to dare trust in oneself as the master of their actions must possess a lofty spirit, a steadfast will, and clear vision. Thus they can truly elevate themselves in doctrine, society, and law for their own sake. For the simplest purpose is as strong as an imperative necessity for them. If anyone considers these aspects concerning what we call society, they will see how necessary this ethics is. It seems like the fiber and heart of man have been torn away, and that's why he has become a fearful, downcast whimperer. We fear truth, fortune, death, and each other. Our time does not produce extraordinary and perfect individuals. We desire men and women who renew life and our social situation, But we see that most figures are not solvent, cannot meet their own needs, that their ambition far exceeds their practical strength, and they continually bow down to beg. Our domestic life is worthy of a beggar. We have not even chosen our arts, activities, marriages, or religion. Society has done that for us. We are armchair soldiers, avoiding the difficult battle of destiny, where strength is born. If our youth fail in their initial tasks, they will lose hope. If a young trader fails, he is told he is ruined. If, a year after graduating, the best of our university brains fails to find employment in an office near Boston or New York, both for himself and his friends, it will seem entirely justified for him to become demoralized and complain for the rest of his days. Any boy anywhere with enough momentum to undertake all professions, to create a team, plow or sell door to door, to lead a school, preach sermons, edit a newspaper, go to Congress, buy public lands and so on, is worth more than 100 of these city puppets. If he walks side by side with his time and is not ashamed to not study a profession, because he does not delay his life but lives it in the moment, he does not have one chance but hundreds. Let a Stoic explain the resources of the individual and tell men that they are not weeping willows but can and must be independent, that by exercising self-confidence, new powers will arise, that a man is the world incarnate, born to heal nations. He should be ashamed of our compassion, and the moment he acts on his own, throwing out the laws, books, fanaticism, and customs through the window, we no longer pity him, we thank him and revere him. This master will restore the splendor befitting human life and make all history admire his name. It is not difficult to see that firm self-confidence must provoke a revolution in all the functions and relations of the individual, in their religion, education, ambitions, lifestyle, alliances, properties, and reflections. First, what prayers do men engage in? What they call a sacred duty lacks bravery and virility. Prayer looks outward and demands that a foreign virtue bring an equally foreign complementarity. Thus it gets lost in an infinite jumble about natural and supernatural, meditation and miraculous. A prayer that implores a particular good, anything that is not the universal good, is corrupted. Prayer is the gaze upon vital facts from the highest viewpoint. This is the soliloquy of a contemplative and joyful spirit. It's the Spirit of God approving its own work. However, when prayer aims at a private goal, it turns into pettiness and theft, as it presupposes duality rather than unity in nature and consciousness. As for the individual, when they unite with God, they cease begging at that moment. They are capable of seeing prayer in all actions, that of the peasant who kneels in the field to pull weeds, or that of the rower who also kneels at the call of their coxswain. These are prayers of truth that can be heard everywhere in nature, although they seek simple objectives in Fletcher's work. When Cattrall's character responds that the hidden meaning lies in our efforts, our values are the best gods, our lamentations are another kind of false prayers. Discontentment is lack of self-confidence. A disease of the mental will calamities can aid those who suffer it. Otherwise, apply to your task, and it will start to be bad if pity does not compensate for your labor. Our compassion is as petty as sorrow. We go to those who cry for nonsense. We sit by their side and weep to accompany them, instead of showing them truth and health with electric discharges that reconnect them with their common sense. The secret of happiness lies in the joy of our hands. Gods and men welcome anyone who helps themselves. For them, all doors are open, all voices greet them, all honors crown them, and all eyes follow them with desire. Our love goes to them, and they embrace it precisely because they do not need it. We touch and receive them eagerly and cautiously because they have decided to follow their own path and ignore our criticisms. Gods love them because men hate them. The blessed immortals help those who persevere, just as men's prayers are a disease of the will. Creeds are a disease of the intellect. Let whoever speaks among us speak, and we will obey them. The place where I do not find God is where my brother has already closed the doors of their own temple and is content to recite the tales of God from their brother or the God of their brother's brother. A new spirit is a new classification. If this spirit possesses an activity and force beyond the ordinary, let whatever water be Houston Beta of War Jr. impose its classification on others, and from there a new system will be born. The disciple's satisfaction is proportional to the depth of thought and the number of objects it touches and leaves within its reach. This can be easily verified in dogmas and churches, which are also classifications of a powerful mind acting on the fundamental ideas of duty and the relationship between man and the Most High, as is the case with Calvinism, Quakerism, or Swedenborg's disciples. The believer submits everything to the new terminology and thus feels the same pleasure as that girl learning botany while discovering a new field with new plants. For a while, the disciple will believe that their intelligence has increased thanks to studying their master's spirit. However, simple minds idolize classifications, taking them as ends in themselves rather than temporary instruments. Thus, the walls of their system and those of the universe blend at the horizon. They believe the stars depend on the ark constructed by their master. They cannot understand that you should have the right to look. They don't even comprehend that you too know how to look. They must scheme to steal our light, not realizing that random and untamed light will penetrate into every home, including theirs. Let them caw and believe it belongs to them. If they are honest and act correctly, soon their new enclosure will become narrow, low, cracking, slanting, decaying, and disappearing. That immortal, renewed, and joyful light will shine with millions of spheres and colors, resplendent upon the universe as if it were the first morning. The lack of a unique culture leads to the superstition of travel, where idols like Italy, England, and Egypt fascinate many. Those who have transformed England, Italy, or Greece into objects of veneration for their imagination have done so by staying where they were, as if they were the axis of the earth. In times of push, we feel that duty is our place. The soul is not a traveler. The wise man stays at home, and when the need to see sets him free, he departs as a missionary of knowledge and virtue. Thus, he visits cities and people as a king, not as an intruder or a valet. I do not oppose navigation around the globe as long as it serves the purposes of art, study, and benevolence. With it, one can first form the individual or ensure that they do not depart abroad, hoping to find something greater than what they already know. He who travels for pleasure, to obtain what he does not have, moves away from himself. And as young as he may be, he ages among old objects. His will and spirit age and dissipate as much as the cities themselves. He carries ruins, and in traveling he brings ruins. Traveling is paradise for the naive. Our initial travels serve to discover how little places differ. In my own home I can dream that the beauty of Naples and Rome intoxicates me, and through that, sadness leaves me. I pack my bags, bid farewell to friends, embark and wake up in Naples. But I have not left behind the harsh reality. Beside me is the same sad and anxious subject I claimed to be fleeing. I seek the Vatican and palaces, try to be enchanted by their views and evocations, but it doesn't happen. My colossus goes where I go with all the fury of travel. It's a symptom of a greater weakness affecting all intellectual activity. The intellect is a wanderer, yet our educational system stimulates impatience. Our minds travel while our bodies must stay home. We settle for imitation, but what is imitation but the journey of the mind? Our homes are built according to foreign taste, our shelves adorned with strange ornaments, and our tastes, opinions, and faculties lean towards the past and the distant. Where the arts have flourished, it is because the soul has created them. The artist only had to seek models within their own thoughts. It was an application of their thought to the task at hand and the conditions to be fulfilled. Beauty, proportion, grandeur of thought, and austere expression seem as close to us as to anyone else. If the artist studies with confidence and dedication what they must do, taking into account the climate, the land, the length of the day, the needs of the people, their habits and forms of government, then they can create a home where all of this can coexist. And thus they will satisfy taste and sentiment. Insist within yourself, never imitate. At any moment, you can present your talent with the strength accumulated over a lifetime. In contrast, talent adopted from others is possessed only in a dated and incomplete manner. Only the Creator can say what they do best. No one knows what they are until they show it. So where is the master who can teach? They have disappeared. It is precisely the part we cannot seize. Shakespeare will never emerge from the study of his works. This is what has been assigned to you, and you cannot hope or risk too much about it. A brave and sublime sentence awaits you at this moment, as brave as Phidias the sculptor, the shoulder of the Egyptians, or the pen of Moses or Dante, although different from all. It does not seem likely that such a fertile and eloquent spirit, with so many distinct voices, would deign to repeat things to you. However, if you can listen to these patriarchs, you can respond to them with the same tone of voice, for hearing and tongue are two organs of the same nature. They inhabit the simple and noble regions of your life. Obey your heart, and you will succeed in reproducing the world of old. If our religion, education, and art direct our gaze towards the foreign, so too does the spirit of our society. All men boast of having contributed to the progress of society, and yet man has not progressed at all. Society never progresses. When it advances on one side, it retreats on the other. It is in perpetual transformation, whether barbaric, civilized, Christian, wealthy, or scientific. But these changes do not constitute improvement. For every gain we achieve, we must sacrifice something. Society enriches itself with new arts at the expense of ancient instincts. What a contrast between, on one hand, the well-dressed man who writes and thinks and carries in his pocket a watch, a pencil, and a letter of credit, and on the other hand, the naked native whose possessions amount to a club, a spear, a small star, and a corner in the communal hut to spend the night. However, if one compares their health, it will be found that the white man has lost his primitive vigor. If what travelers say is true, striking a savage with an axe will heal his wounds in a day or two, as if striking soft resin, whereas a similar blow will send the white man to his grave. The civilized man builds carriages, but has abandoned the use of his feet. He can support himself with crutches, but has lost the power of his muscles. He wears a fine Swiss watch, but has forgotten how to tell time by the sun. He can get accurate information from his sister, who is a navigator in Greenwich, but the ordinary man ignores the stars in the sky, contemplates neither solstice, and barely knows anything about the equinox. The brilliant calendar of the year has no mark in his mind. His schedule weakens his memory. Libraries are a burden on his genius. Insurance companies increase the number of accidents. One might wonder if technology doesn't hinder us too much, if refinement hasn't caused us to lose strength and also something of the impulse of natural virtue, because of a Christianity entrenched in its forms and institutions. Every Stoic was a Stoic, but in Christianity, where is the Christian? There is no greater deviation in moral law than that which concerns size or volume. Nowadays, men are not greater than they were before. There is a strange equality between the illustrious men of antiquity and those of today. All the science, art, religion, and philosophy of the 19th century do not serve to educate men greater than the heroes created by Plutarch 23 or 24 centuries ago. Mankind does not progress with time. Socrates, Anaxagoras, and Diogenes were figures of great stature, but we have not inherited from them a social class. One who belongs to their class is generally not called by their name, but has their own and establishes their own institution. The arts and inventions of each era constitute their attire, but do not strengthen the individual. Perhaps the perfected machines cause more harm than good. Hudson and Berlin achieved so much with their fishing boats that they astonished Parry and Franklin, whose equipment had already exhausted the resources of science and art. Galileo needed only simple lenses to discover a series of celestial phenomena grander than anything seen since. Columbus discovered the New World sailing on a caravel. It is curious to see how means and technologies that were applauded a few years or centuries ago fall into disuse and periodically disappear. Genius brings man back to the essential. Let us consider progress in the art of war as a triumph of science. However, Napoleon conquered Europe using the bivouac system, which relies solely on courage without any external aid. According to reports, the emperor argued that it was impossible to form a perfect army without removing from soldiers their weapons, stores, commissaries, and vehicles, and in the Roman manner, giving them a ration of wheat so they could grind it with their own hands and bake their own bread. Society is a wave. The wave advances, but the water it is composed of is not the same particle. It does not rise from the valley to the crest. Its unity is but an appearance. The individuals who today form a nation will die next year and take their experiences with them. Thus, trust in property, including trust in the governments that protect it, also reflects a lack of self-confidence. Men have averted their gaze from themselves and things for so long that they consider religious, educational, and civil institutions as defenders of property. They disdain any criticism of these institutions because they perceive it as a tax on property. They measure people's worth by what they possess, not by who they are. Nevertheless, the newfound respect for one's own nature causes the cultivated man to be ashamed of his possessions. Above all, he despises what he owns and considers it accidental, something that came to him through inheritance, donation, or crime. Thus he feels that it is not possession, that nothing belongs to him, that his goods are not linked to his being, but that he simply keeps them because no thief, no revolution can take them from him. However, man's nature is to constantly acquire, and what he acquires is a living property that is not exposed to legislators, crowds, revolutions, fire, storms, or bankruptcies. It is constantly renewed where human beings breathe. Your share of life, said Caliph Ali, always follows behind you, so stop seeking ours. Our dependence on these foreign goods leads us to a servile respect for numbers. Political parties celebrate popular assemblies, and as the attendance grows, the thousands of new eyes and arms that greet each new coalition allow the young patriot to feel stronger than before. Similarly, reformers organize assemblies where voting and decisions are made by acclamation. My friends, God will not approach and will not dwell within you through such things. The moment a man abandons all external support, that is when I see him strong and predominant. Each time he needs to resort to his standard, he becomes weaker. Is not an individual better than a city? Ask nothing of man, for in a perpetually changing world it is your firm column that must appear as the support for everything around you. He who knows that power is innate, who understands that weakness comes from seeking good outside oneself, and who, knowing this, engages in his own thoughts, is the one who can walk straight, govern his extremities, and accomplish miracles, just as one who walks relying on his feet is more stable than one who walks on his head. He will harness what we call luck. Many are those who play with it and win it all, or lose it all according to the wheel. But you must understand that such gains are illicit, and you must navigate in cause and effect, which are God's dignitaries. Work and acquire in will, and you will have the wheel of fortune without fearing its turns. A political victory, a rent increase, recovery after illness, or the return of an absent friend are facts that fill us with joy, and logically, you think auspicious days should follow. Believe nothing except yourself, for nothing but yourself can give you peace, nothing but the triumph of principles.